Hello, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming, and today we're going to talk about the Defkilla Wartrike in our Live Laugh Waagh series. But first, I'd like to go over some announcements. I know the video content's been a little slow lately. I've done my streams, but I haven't really been putting out a lot of the pre-recorded content, and I apologize for that. With holidays being what they are and having younger kids, it's been a little bit hectic. Plus, I've had some other things going on just in life in general. So we're to a point now where I'm good, and I'm going to start moving forward and getting more of the pre-made content up rather than just the streams. So look forward to that because that's going to be a nice shift towards, what's going on and what's happening. In addition, we got some upcoming events in January. One of the guys on my team, John Anto, is going to be the tournament organizer for a Highlander tournament. That's going to be I think, the 28th of January at Reliquary Gaming in Chesterton. So I'll get to play in it because I won't be the judge. And then at the end of February, I'll be running a tournament in Plymouth. That's the 25th of February. And then I will be down in Lafayette 2 weeks before that to play in an event being organized by a gentleman who has been to a few of my events. So we get a little bit of cross promotion going on there, and we get to kind of like build our community together, and it's really cool. Another thing I wanted to do is I'm going to be shifting my focus a little bit here. I feel like I was very unfocused with my videos when we first started. Like it was a lot of how to play, and then some orcs, and then some this, and then some that. And we're going to start kind of focusing it down. We're going to focus it down to just probably orc content and core rules for now, and we'll dip the Eldar and Dark Eldar in as we go. As everybody knows, I'm going to be playing a lot of Drukhari this year. So I will probably be doing the Drukhari videos as I do the events, as more of a reactionary recap of the event, rather than what I've been doing. And it's mostly just so I can focus my content and not feel like I'm being spread too thin on what I make and what I do. So you will still get some elf content. You're going to get some more content. You're going to get some core rules content. Uh, it's just going to be a little bit more focused on the core rules and the orcs. The other thing I wanted to do real quick is some quick self-promotion. Make sure you check out the Teespring store. If you don't want to be a patron in the Patreon, and that's fine. I'm not gonna ask you or beg you to. I'm just gonna let my content and my skill level at this game kind of speak for itself. And then if you want to support, that's awesome. I appreciate it. But if you'd rather get a product, this would also support me, and that'd be cool. We do themed T-shirts. And these are two of my favorites. The Plasma Daka. If you're like me, Plasma Daka does make you harder than Mega Armor. So I would definitely check that out if you're an Orc player or if you just like Plasma. And then the other one you're looking at there's no armor like Plot Armor. And again, we just like to poke fun at Marines around here. So it's nothing. It's not an attempt to be rude or malicious. We just like to tease Marines and Marine players. So thank you for that. Let's begin. First, we're going to go over our data sheet. We're going to talk about what a speed boss is. We're going to go over what equipment options this lad will have, and then any custom jobs. And then we're going to talk about potential uses for this model. Okay. Here is the data sheet. Uh, it looks okay when you look at it on paper. He's got a 14-inch move, weapon skill 2, ballistic skill 5, strength 5, toughness 6, 8 wounds, 5 attacks, 7 leadership, 4+ save. So he looks pretty standard for like an orc war boss, aside from the movement. You know, um, he's got three twin boomsticks, a killajet, and a snag-a-claw. With the killajet being a combo Burna or Melta, which is kind of neat. You get either one. You get to pick. It has a 12-inch range. The Burna's, it's actually a Scorcha, not a Burna. If you look at its weapon profile, you get a D6 auto hit, strength 5, -1, 1 damage. Or you get 2 shots, strength 8, -4, D6, D6 plus 2 within half range. So a very standard Melta kind of profile. It does get 2 shots. So throughout the course of the game, you're going to average, 2 hits with this thing. So again, it's orc shooting. The twin boomstick is 2 shots. Strength 5, no AP, but again, it is just You get 3 of them, so you're going to get 6 shots out of that. And then the Snag a Claw is just a strength +2, -2, 2 damage, but it does reroll its own wound rolls. So the Snag a Claw, strength 7, -2, 2 damage is kind of lackluster when compared to what other war bosses can do in melee. But the rerolling of the wounds is a neat gimmick or attribute that we don't really get a lot of. As we move further down the datasheet, he's got Here We Go, Ramshackle, and Waagh. Ramshackle is one of those abilities that is really good until it's bad and really bad until it's good. There's certain armies that it's actually like pretty solid into, and then, there's more armies that it just doesn't ever come up. Big red button, it auto advances 6 inches. Dead Tough gives it a 5-up invuln, and then once per game for its Fuel Mix a Grot, you get to add 9 inches to your movement instead of 6. And then obviously it's a vehicle, so it explodes. Everything within 3 inches suffers 1 mortal wound. And then those are your options for custom jobs. We'll go into that in just a little bit. He is a speed boss, and as such, he gives you access to the speed Waagh instead of the regular Waagh. Okay? The speed Waagh is right in front of you. Orc models from your army do not suffer the penalty incurred to their hit rolls for firing assault weapons in the same turn that their unit advanced. Each time an orc vehicle or orc biker model from your army shoots with a DACA weapon, make 1 additional attack with that weapon. DACA weapon is where most of our assault went. Most of the orc codex went from assault weapons to DACA weapons, and DACA is just honestly shittier rapid fire. That's all it is. And then each time a model in an orc vehicle or orc biker unit from your army makes a ranged attack, improve the armor penetration of that characteristic by 1. Okay, so basically, speed Waagh makes your shooting, I don't want to say better because it's not the right word. Gives you the potential to, it lets you roll more dice and then increases your AP by 1. And then the first half of that drops off and you keep the AP for the second turn. Okay? So the turn you declare your Waagh, you get both of them. The turn after you declare your Waagh, it goes down to the second half. It's not good. It's not worth taking, in my opinion, from a competitive standpoint. Like, if you're playing a lore friendly or fluffy army, or you just want to put some buggies on the table and have some fun, sure. But from a competitive standpoint, it's not worth taking. As a person who plays orcs and plays into a variety of armies, I've never thought, thank God for my shooting. It's so good. Whereas in 8th edition, I did have that interaction with a few units. There were definitely some units where it was like, man, I need these. They shoot really good, and they just take a lot of pressure off my melee, and they will lock down some lanes. Now, I don't really have that interaction, and a lot of it has to do with, 1, Armor of Contempt, and 2, they lost the DACA rule. But again, I'm not going to get on this tangent. It's a whole separate video, just touching on why I think competitively this isn't worth, because we're talking about a speed boss. For options, so he is a vehicle, and they really restricted vehicle access to relics in this codex. So he has access to Resmecha's Red or Paint, which is +2 movement, and everything within an engagement range fights last. That's a really good relic. The problem is that a lot of people don't think Evil Sons are good competitively. I disagree. But again, I'm not playing them like you would play a traditional Evil Sons army. But, again, different video for a different time. Morgoth's Thinking Cap. In your command phase, roll a die on a 4+, gain a command point. It's one of the few command point regeneration abilities orcs have. So it's definitely worth taking if you need to put a relic on this dude. I don't know that you put it on him. The Bad Skull Banner, 6-inch aura of no obsec, and it does stack with the big gob, so you could give him like a 9-inch aura of no obsec. We're going to get into what I think is the way to use this model, and it is not that. Here is Warlord trade options. I'm not going to read through all of these. I'm just going to touch on the ones that I think are probably your best bet for him. Follow Me, lads, is solid. after it makes a charge, everything else adds one to their charge roll as long as they're charging the same target. You know, with this thing's mobility, you can slam it into something and then have 8-inch rerollable charges coming out of deep strike. So that is potentially worth putting on him just for that specific interaction. It does make a lot of your other charges easier. Going from a 9 to an 8 is a big probability spike. Again, we talked about the big gob. Art as nails, -1 to wound is solid, but it's better on other things. So again, moving on. Brutal but cunning, better on other things. It just gives you extra attacks for each one that doesn't resolve damage. Cunning but brutal, fight first. Not terrible on this because it's not exceptionally resilient. So being able to do your attacks before your opponent does theirs is potentially worth. Might is right is +1 strength, +1 attack. I think that's probably worth. Getting it to 6 attacks and strength 8 is not a bad thing, especially again. What I think this thing is a torpedo, and if you build it right, like that is worth using it. Like that makes the torpedo better. All right, speed freaks, roadkiller. On a 2+, you do a D3 mortals on the charge, get up in their faces, fall back and shoot, and then junk boss 4++. Roadkiller to me is the best out of the speed freaks ones. Fall back and shoot is okay, but again, it's orc shooting, so like who cares? And then the 4++ isn't bad, but it's not great. You know, it's already got a 4-up save, so it's not like you're really adding that much resiliency to it. If we go through the clan traits, though, that's where it gets interesting. Because, like, the best armor Teeth can buy gives you a 4++ and +1 armor. It's not bad. You know, it shifts it to a 3-up save, which, you know, with the prevalence of AP in the game, isn't going to be, like, that +1 to save isn't going to be super relevant, but it's not bad. But then the downside is you got to play Bad Moons, and their cultures do not affect any of his guns, because their culture only affects heavies and DACA. It will do an extra pip of AP on a wound roll of 6, but it won't get the extra range. I've got a plan. Uh, it's one of the worst redeploy abilities in the game, so I wouldn't even mess with it. I do think the Defkilla Wartrike has play in Blood Axes, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Opportunist, ignore lookout sir within 12. I mean, it's not terrible. Again, it's orc shooting, but you do get a flamer, and you do get 2 melta shots that might eventually hit something. The downside to that is that like most of the things you are going to shoot are going to have an invuln, so it's kind of a trade. Like cool. I think opportunist is better used on other things like a big mech rather than this dude. Faster than use, 6 inches. You can pick a core and can advance and charge. So I think that's really good. The only real downside is that the only core units you're probably going to be picking, unless it's turn 1, maybe turn 2, are going to be bikes or squigs, because this thing is going to be fast, and you don't want it just sitting in the backfield doing nothing. I mean, maybe for the first couple turns, if you've got some mega knobs or knobs that you need to get advanced and charged, that might be worth just to get them up the board. Like if you go second and your opponent pushes really aggressively, you could slap it on one of your regular units and then have that advance and charge. That might be worth. But if you keep this dude flanked with bikes or squigs most of the game, that's probably a better use of that. Killer reputation, minus or 3-inch -1 leadership, -1 attrition, and 6-inch +1 leadership. So that one's actually not bad because orc leadership is atrocious. Like it is terrible. I would take it more for the +1 leadership than the -1 leadership and attrition. But the -1 leadership and attrition isn't bad. And again, that could it's arguably like a solid choice if you wanted to make it some kind of actual like buff unit. Proper killy, additional AP +1 attack, also not bad because it pushes you to -3 instead of -2, because that -2 is real poopy into like Marines and things like that right now. Surly is a Squigoth, 4+ return after death with D3 wounds. So again, it's snake bites. Don't take the Defkilla Wartrike because don't play snake bites. Like if you're playing competitively, just don't play snake bites. There's probably ways to play them competitively, but there's so many better options if you're playing at a tournament or competitively that I just wouldn't even waste my time. All right, custom jobs. It has access to the Shaka Hull, which is when an enemy unit targets this unit on a 4+, that enemy unit takes D3 mortals in the fight phase. So if I charge you, when you make your attacks at me, I roll a die, and then on a 4-up, you take a D3 mortals. And then Squig Hide Tires, +1 move, +2 advance. So both of those are actually solid, especially for the way that I think it should get used. Speed Boss means you don't get the much improved Waagh. So remember, the new Waagh gives you +1 strength and an invuln save. So if the Defkilla Wartrike is your Warlord, you don't get any of that. So he's not great, and the Speed Waagh is not great if you're planning on running it as your Warlord. Remember, the Speed Waagh was strong on release, but they did restrict aircraft, and really restricting the aircraft is what killed Speed Waagh. I know some people think that the buggies were oppressive. The buggies are not oppressive, especially now with the changes to indirect fire. You got to remember that most people were running just like, oh, here's my 9 Rucka Truck Squig buggies and my 9 jets. Sure, like it was okay. Like it was good if you went first, and it was a lot of shooting, especially in freebooters, but it's one of those where it wasn't as good as people thought it was. They just hadn't figured out how to play against it. And really, it was really good on GW terrain specifically. I've played against it multiple times, and I never felt like, oh, this is just so good that I can't beat it. The first time was kind of culture shock, but it was never just like, it wasn't like the Custodes or the Tau book when they got released. Uh, it was just like, here's my one hyper specific build that's really good. And if I go second and you have any kind of guns, I'm probably not playing the game. Taking a second, so again, just a little sidetrack there. I would take a second detachment and then use my Defkilla Wartrike as a torpedo unit. The War Boss on bike is probably better. I think it's 5 points cheaper, and it has access to better relics because it's not a vehicle. So if you wanted to build like a Smash Captain effectively, you could. Whereas like with this, you're playing disruption more than anything. The pros of the Wartrike: it lacks any kind of aura or buffing abilities, so this makes it a terrible unit for synergy. However, that's also a pro because you're not losing any efficiency if it dies. Cool, it's dead. With a 14-inch movement, it auto advances 6. Once per game, it auto advances 9. That means a 23-inch minimum movement on the Waagh if you take a regular War Boss as your Warlord. So again, this is assuming it's in a second detachment and is not your Warlord. It's also a vehicle, which means it has access to ramming speed, which is 3d6 dice, 2+ do d3 mortals on the charge, right? Let me rephrase that. You roll 3d6 dice for your charge, and then after your charge on a 2-up, you do d3 mortals. It's also one of the only units, I already mentioned this, that have assault weapons in the codex, and it does re-roll its own wounds in melee. Again, re-rolls are something that orcs don't have access to. They had very limited access in 8th, and they have less access in 9th. So it's one of those where having it is still better than not. The cons, it doesn't have any abilities, so it's a terrible unit for synergy. Yeah, that is both a pro and a con. Speed Boss means Speed Wob, which is kind of poopy, again, but that's only if it's your Warlord. If you take the second detachment, I think there's play. Its melee is kind of lackluster. Strength 7, -2, 2 damage melee. When you compare it to other War Bosses, he's kind of poopy in the fight phase, and he's kind of poopy in the shooting phase. So you're probably thinking, like, how could you make this thing good? But with Armor of Contempt being a thing, like that -2 is even worse. But it does get the +1 strength on the Waagh, so it does go to strength 8, so at least you can wound like a Marine or a Terminator on a 2, even though they're just getting a 2-up save. So Terminators are probably not a thing you want to charge into with this guy. Shooting is pretty abysmal. It's got some like on paper, you're like, wow, this shooting's actually okay. But then when you remember that Armor of Contempt exists and 60-ish% of the game is in power armor, it's going to feel bad. And then you got to remember that we're ballistic skill 5. So here's my 2 Melta shots, which are going to equate into, if it lives all game, 10 shots, right? I have now averaged 1.8 hits roughly. You know, there's just better platforms for shooting. It's such an inefficient model. But here's where I think it could have potential use. Having a second war boss in a second detachment and use its high speed so that you can disrupt softer units or the backfield. What I mean by that is, so like, for example, let's say your opponent has some infiltrators that are screening out their backfield with their 12-inch bubble of no deep strike. With a 23-inch minimum and then a 3d6 charge, you could get to those infiltrators pretty quickly. And you're not going to kill them all, but if you start chewing through them, you might kill them all before you it would take some really good dice and some really bad dice, but you might kill them all. But you could also just potentially slowly kill them off an objective, which would cause them to have to kind of change what they're doing. You know, you don't need this to kill things, you need it to tie up things and cause problems. If it dies, it dies. So if you can tag, like if you're playing Tau, for example, and you can tag a hammerhead with it immediately, just to have like 1 or 2 turns where that thing can't shoot you, awesome. Like that might be worth. Or sniping characters, like if they have good support characters that aren't necessarily super dangerous in melee. Like a Master of Possessions isn't super dangerous in melee. So if somebody leaves one kind of out in the open and you can tag him, you can potentially kill that with your Defkilla Wartrike. And even if you don't kill it, they have to get away from you unless they have something there to countercharge you. You're not going to die to a Master of Possessions in melee with your Wartrike, again, outside of like some crazy good dice. So these are ways that I think you could use it. If they've got something there that's just giving you fits or that is just buffing their army, and you can tag it with this dude, he might not kill it, but he might kill it. And even if he doesn't, it's going to force your opponent to have to react. And if they kill your Wartrike, you're just losing a Wartrike. But if you kill their Master of Possessions, or you kill their Battlesuit Commander, or you kill their uh, Librarian, for example, they've lost damage, they've lost support, they've lost whatever it is they've lost. Whereas, like I said, like, big deal. You literally lose a 120-point model that doesn't do anything. So it's how you look at it. I'm not saying you should take it in every list. I'm saying this is how you could use this. It is still a vehicle, so you can score like engage on all fronts with it. So that's also another thing to keep in mind. With that kind of movement, you can get it into weird little corners and pockets, and that is also potentially a way to use it. Some interesting and useful combos. So I've been on an Evil Sunz kick lately. I'm a big Death Skulls player. Anybody that watches the channel knows I'm a big Death Skulls player. But man, lately I have just been on a Sunz kick. And for me, like if I'm going to use it, you give it the Squig Hide tires. It gives it +1 movement, +2 advance. It already gets 2 inches of movement from the Sunz because it has a speed freak keyword, right? And then it receives a +1 advance from the Sunz, which means you're going to go up to 17 inches of total movement. And if you use the Mix-a-Grot, you auto advance 12 because you get 9 inches for the Grot, +1 for Sunz, +2 for the Squig Hide tires, which gives you 29 inches of movement. And you get to shoot your weapons at no penalty because they are all assault. And then you can ramming speed for 3d6 inches of charging. And you don't have to put a relic or a warlord trait on him with that build. You could just give him whatever. You could add Res Mecha's red or paint to add 2 more inches to his movement and make everything within engagement range fight last. But if you need everything in engagement range to fight last with your Defkilla Wartrike, you're not sending it at the right targets. And I would save Res Mecha's red or paint for different units. Again, that's a whole second video I could do about great uses for redder paint. Blood Axes, I think, also have a really good play with this unit because Blood Axes give you fall back and charge or shoot. So then if you take Roadkilla, every time you charge, you do a D3 Mortals on a 2+, and you can repeatedly fall back and charge into softer targets, right? And then Shaka Hull, so that on a 4+, after your opponent fights, they take a D3 Mortals. And then if you stack ramming speed for that with that, you could do a potential 3d3 mortal wounds to an enemy without even allocating your attacks, like just based off of charging and getting fought. In addition to that, I think a Blood Axe buggy list has some play because so many of the buggies have some sort of spiked ram interaction. So you can just repeatedly like fall back and charge into things to try to do mortals, or fall back and shoot. Those are the two that really stood out to me, and I just wanted to kind of share those with everybody. Sorry, this is a bit of a longer video. Once again, we're going to shout out our immortals. Thank you, Captain Too Tall and the real Donnie G and Lord Wellingstone. I appreciate you guys. T-shirts for all of you already. Outside of that, if you want to be a patron, just go to Patreon. Link is in the description. I appreciate any support you guys can give me. Here are links. They are, once again, in the description. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Have a good day.